Hi, I'm Michael Braa, founder of Atlanta's Private Investigations, based right here in California's dynamic Central Valley. As we race towards the middle of the 21st century, I've found myself repeatedly asking one critical question: what's next for my industry? With groundbreaking advances in technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, unprecedented access to information, and future innovations we can't yet even imagine, are we becoming obsolete? Am I already there? Gone are the days of hiring someone to do simple background checks. With just a few keystrokes, I can teach anyone to perform their own research at home in under 20 minutes. We have cameras tracking license plates, cell phones giving up location data. Do we still need traditional surveillance teams? And the countless hours that we spent poring over documents and financial records. Now I could train a machine to accomplish the work of 1,000 analysts in just an hour. These are the challenging questions we'll explore together. Each episode will dive deep into a different topic, breaking down how investigations have traditionally been conducted and revealing how we're evolving to stay ahead. I'll introduce you to Maya, a revolutionary AI specifically designed and trained for investigative research. We'll examine cutting-edge technology, some publicly available, some not so much, and continuously ask ourselves, what's next? There's no better way to kick this series off than by exploring the dramatic shifts in technology across generations. Today, we'll revisit one of America's most infamous cold cases, the tragic unsolved murder of Elizabeth Short, widely known as the Black Dahlia. We'll start by reviewing the facts as they stood in 1947, then talk with our expert guest, veteran law enforcement officer Carl Whitney. Together, we'll explore how modern investigative techniques could reshape this case, asking the question, could today's technology have solved Elizabeth's murder? So let's dive in. I've asked my research assistant Kara to prepare a quick briefing on the Black Dahlia case. After that, we'll sit down with Carl to discuss the future of investigative technology. Let's head over and see what Kara's uncovered. Okay, 1947, Elizabeth Short. What have you got for me, Kara?
Elizabeth Short, born in Massachusetts, was an aspiring actress who moved frequently from Florida to California seeking Hollywood fame. She was known for her striking appearance and preference for black clothing, later earning the nickname, the Black Dahlia. Short was fingerprinted twice, once for underage drinking in Santa Barbara in 1943, and again when applying for a job at an army base. These fingerprints would later identify her body. On January 15, 1947, Betty Bersinger discovered Elizabeth's mutilated body in a vacant lot on South Norton Avenue near a sidewalk, initially mistaking it for a mannequin due to its pale and drained appearance. The crime scene was grotesque. Elizabeth's body had been bisected at the waist with surgical precision. There was no blood at the site, suggesting she was killed elsewhere, cleaned meticulously, and staged deliberately. The autopsy revealed severe torture, ligature marks on her wrists, ankles, and neck, deep cuts on her body, removal of tissue from her breasts and thighs, and a horrific Glasgow smile, deep facial lacerations extending from mouth to ears. Dr. Frederick Newbar determined Elizabeth died from hemorrhage and shock due to severe trauma and massive blood loss from facial wounds. He estimated her death to be approximately 10 hours before discovery. Investigators found minimal evidence: tire tracks, a single heel print, and an empty cement sack with traces of watery blood, possibly used to drain or transport her body. No murder weapon or fingerprints were recovered. Police appealed publicly, learning Elizabeth was last seen alive at the Biltmore Hotel on January 9th, dropped off by Robert Manley. Despite extensive public outreach, reliable sightings after January 9th remain elusive. LAPD explored theories suggesting the killer had medical or anatomical knowledge due to the precise nature of wounds and dismemberment. Investigators extensively questioned medical students, professionals, and even local butchers. Despite several leads and over 150 interviews conducted by LAPD, no arrests were ever made, and this chilling crime remains unsolved to this day.
One of my mentors told me, always surround yourself with extraordinary individuals. Well, Carl Whitney is one of those extraordinary individuals. I have had the honor and the privilege of knowing him as a friend and working with him on many cases. Carl is a seasoned law enforcement professional with over 30 years experience. He recently retired as a lieutenant in 2021. And throughout his career, Carl served in a wide range of assignments, including homicide investigations, SWAT operations, gang enforcement, white-collar crimes. As a press information officer and media liaison, he helps strengthen community relations while maintaining transparency and trust. His deep commitment to professional development and public service earned him numerous accolades, including the Medal of Valor, life-saving award, and recognition as the Officer of the Year. Carl gave us some of his time, sat down and talked to us about the Black Dahlia. Here's that interview. Okay, Carl, let's get right into it. The Black Dahlia. This murder captured national attention almost immediately. Why do you think this particular case resonated so deeply with the American public?
So this case is the story of every young woman that's out there. And then the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, she was killed in her prime. A beautiful young woman, post-World War II, had dreams of stardom, and then she was struck down in her prime in a horrific way. It was a horrific crime that captured the attention of the public, and the media put it out there, and everyone saw this, and they had some empathy for Elizabeth, and they saw that this crime happened, and they realized it could be any of their daughters that are seeking this stardom, and that's what happened. So,
and from the law enforcement perspective too, when you come across a crime scene like this, I mean, this has got to be something that you want to get taken care of right away. I think I've had officers call me or tell me before that this is a case you want to have it solved in 48 hours. You don't want this thing going on.
yeah,
Do you agree with that?
I do absolutely. I do agree with that. You know, I saw some footage of detectives being interviewed about this crime. They showed up on scene, and it was shocking to them to see that this woman was cut in half, and then all her blood was drained from her body, and it was a horrific crime scene. And they realized that, hey, whoever did this is an evil monster and needs to be taken off the streets immediately.
So speaking of 1947 and investigative techniques, there wasn't a whole lot to work with. I think we had a pretty good database of fingerprints, and maybe even shoe prints, tire prints were things that we might have been able to match up. But other than that and interviews, there just wasn't a whole lot to go with, right?
No, we don't have the DNA technology that we do now. So we have a database called CODIS where we have all the DNA evidence associated with certain crimes put into a system, and then we can find matches through CODIS. I used to get CODIS hits all the time when I was a detective.
Now, just to interrupt you real quick, can you explain what CODIS is? I know what it is, you know what it is, but our audience might not understand.
So what CODIS is it's a national database. When somebody's arrested for a certain crime, a certain felony, their DNA is collected at the time of their arrest. And their DNA is uploaded into this database. So it's like having a fingerprint database. So their DNA is codified into this database, and we have a unique match to a person. So now as a detective, if you have a crime and you've collected some DNA, some blood, or some other fluid at the crime scene, or some hair or something like that, we're able to take that evidence and we're able to upload it into CODIS. And then it immediately tries to find a match. And if there's no match, then that unknown DNA will be put into the database too. So we can say, hey, there's associated crimes with this person's DNA. So we use CODIS all the time. We get hits for like stolen vehicles, felonies that happen, rapes, murders, and we're able to make matches through CODIS. And we use it for now we have DNA we've collected from crime scenes that are cold cases, and we're able to take matches from our cold case evidence and match that into CODIS to see if there's a match of a suspect.
So segueing in from what you just said right there, let's fast forward to 2025. You're the detective in charge, and this case drops on your desk. What's the first thing that you're doing?
Well, first of all, my agency, being an officer here in Southern California, a former officer after 32 years, but what we do is you got to get out to the scene. You have to call in all your resources. It's all hands on deck, especially in something like this. You're going to call in every detective from every division to help you look at this horrendous crime and then get it solved. So very first thing you do is lock down the scene. So I always tell my people, you start out wide and you expand that crime scene. Start out wide, then you can shrink it if you have to. So the reason we do that is that we want to see and preserve as much evidence as possible. You look at some of these photos from the previous crime scene in 1947, you had reporters walking around, you had numerous detectives, you had the brass walking around. So they're trampling all that evidence and it's getting contaminated. On a case like this, nobody comes in, only the forensic people and only the lead detective. So that way we're not contaminating the evidence. So lock down your crime scene and then you document everything thoroughly. Get your drones up, take some photographs, start collecting evidence, collect things that you might think might not be evidence, collect it because it could be evidence. So collect as much evidence as possible.
So here's your crime scene. The body is found carefully posed. It's been cleaned with gasoline, drained of any blood, no fingerprints. I believe there was a tire print and a heel print from a lady's shoe, and a cement bag that may have been used to carry the body. Might have been a little bit of blood in that. What do you get from that?
So you go through it and you start looking for any type of small, minute detail that may have been missed. I remember one of my cases, it was one of our cold cases, going through it, and you think very small detail. Think of the size of a human eyelash. We had one single eyelash on one of our cold cases, and we were able to put that eyelash into the database, and through a familial match, not the actual suspect match, but through a family member match, we were able to get a suspect identified from that single eyelash, which led to our suspect. So back in 1947, you had all these little details that you may have missed. So, there could be some facial hair, an eyebrow hair, eyelash, something as minute as that you don't think is very important at the time, but that small little detail can lead to a suspect. So collect all the evidence you have, even though no matter how small it is, it could be something important. Now we do fingernail scrapings on people. We do things like that, and we're able to, sometimes a victim will scratch a victim, and then they'll have under their skin, there'll be some skin cells that we could use to track that person down.
DNA has been a revolution in crime fighting, and in their defense, law enforcement in 1947 had no idea about DNA. This wasn't even something that was on the radar. So obviously, we can't hold them responsible or for being careless. They just had no idea that an eyelash might or a hair could be important. Correct?
Right. Then you do the autopsy. The autopsy can reveal a lot of things too. Like, what are their stomach contents? We can find out what somebody had to eat prior to, what was their last meal. We could look at drugs in their system to find out if there's any type of drug in their system. They've been knocked out with some type of drug that made them incapacitated them. So we look at things like that. So the autopsies are just as important as the actual crime scene, because you never know what you're going to find during the autopsy. With Mrs. Short, we saw that there's evidence that she had been tied up. So she had injuries on her wrist and on her knees and around her neck. So, and based on that evidence, it showed that this person has been tied up. Maybe you're going through your crime scene and you see a zip tie or you see a piece of rope, and you don't think nothing of it because it's filled with a bunch of other trash. But that one piece of evidence could lead to something else, could lead to the victim's or suspect's DNA on that one piece of evidence too. And then you mentioned the cement. So the cement bag, there could be other evidence in there, like dirt, that would show, hey, it came from this basement of this person's house. It could lean back to anthropologists could look at the bugs that are collected, and there's actually anthropologists that look at the bugs that say, hey, this bug is indigenous to this area, and this is where we find it, and that could be a clue that will lead us to, hey, it's only found in this area of LA County. That's where these bugs are at, and that's another clue for you to follow up on.
We'll continue our conversation with Lieutenant Carl Whitney in just a moment. Welcome back as we continue our conversation with Carl Whitney. Some of the other modern technologies that we're using, and I'm talking about some of the ones I would call exotic, but that's because I'm a techno geek. Things like license plate readers. We mentioned facial identifying, facial recognition software, but there's also geofencing. There's looking at internet searches, cell phones. How do those help?
So let's go 1947. A young woman in her 20s. She's a movie star. Fast forward to 2025. What does every young woman have? They have a cell phone. And what do they have? They have social media. And then what do they have? They have DMs. They have photographs. They have pictures of guys. They have text messages. So in this situation with Mrs. Short, it's 2025. She has a phone. We're going to write a search warrant. We're going to get into her phone. We're going to look at her phone. We're going to paint a profile. Who does she hang out with? Who does she talk to? Where has she been? What does her GPS location on her phone show her where she's been at? What was her last text message? Who does she hang out with? What are her DMs saying? Because we could find out if she went on a date with somebody, and we could track phones that way. Like, there's one case recently in Atlanta where they had a homicide, dead guy in a parking lot, gangster, no suspects. And of course, in this situation, nobody saw anything. Everybody was in the bathroom at the time this happened. I didn't see anything, officer, other than the bathroom. And that's the typical story we get from people. But what these detectives were really smart, what they were able to do, they used this third-party company to aggregate the data. Hey, give me a picture of who was here in this geofence around this restaurant at 1:30 in the morning. And they were able to get like 3 or 4 phones that were at that location at that time and paint a profile, find out who that person was, which led them to identifying other gangs that were involved in this homicide. So, and people don't realize that when you sign up for something on your phone, you think it's totally innocuous. It's not important. Yeah, I'm going to accept the terms and conditions, but they're giving up their private data, and that private data is sold and it's accessible to the public for us to access that information. So that little data will help solve a case. Mrs. Short, she's in the area. We could look at her phone to find out where did she come from? Where did she go? What was her last 24, 48, 96 hours? what was she doing during that time? And we could paint a picture through her phone location, through her phone history, and find out through her GPS location. And then think about phones, pictures. When you take a photograph on your phone, sometimes these phones will capture the GPS location where that photograph was taken. We look at photographs, we look into the metadata of the photos, just find out where the person was at, when was this photo taken, what's the GPS location of this phone. So people don't realize that the metadata that's in their photographs will record a lot of information that's hidden that they don't see all the time. So those are all clues and tools we use.
The phone it's essentially a time machine of where a person has been, what they've been doing. We not only take pictures, but we use it to post on social media. Plus, my contact list on my phone is probably 1,000 names long. So,
yeah, just look at the stuff we see with phones, even with these encrypted apps, like the signal gate, all the signal that's in the air. So you got signal happening, but there's information that we can collect to find out who's on the phone, who's in the group, who was talking, and so these apps that are out there capture all this information. I remember when I started one of my homicides, I had a case where I was doing they called a cell phone tower dump, and I wanted to find out who was near the cell tower at the time of this homicide happened. So we do a cell tower dump and it tells me all the phones, and then I have to go through all that data to find out where they're at. So there's things that you can do as cell phone tower dumps. You can look at the geofencing to put people in certain areas at certain times. It's so much better now. The technology is amazing. And then you got Ring doorbell cameras. Everyone has their Ring doorbell apps, right? So, and then we got Ring doorbell cameras that capture cars in the area. We have Flock Systems. It's another great company that's out there. Flock cameras are throughout different cities, private industries. You can scan for license plates. You can do LPR recognition. So the LPRs tell us, hey, these are the cars that were in the area at the time of this crime. And then you say, hey, I'm looking for a black Lincoln Continental. And then you run the plates, and then you can do a DMV database search. You can scrub the plates against the black Lincoln Continentals. And then you can find out, okay, there was 5 black Lincoln Continentals at this area at this time. And those are leads you can follow up on. So LPR data that we collect out there is huge in solving crimes. So, but there's like Flock Systems, they're solving crimes left and right. Every week I see Flock solve this crime, Flock solve that crime. And then you got facial recognition. So, and then we get some videos of a crime, and we can use facial recognition that scrubs the photograph of the suspect to a known database of people that have been arrested before. So there's so many tools out there that are available today that they didn't have in 1947. That if they had that in 47, they probably would have solved this crime within a week. So based on that alone.
Yeah. So you have this tower of this amount of information, and back if we look at the number of suspects that they had back in 1947, you've got 150 people that they've interviewed, I guess. So they probably even had more suspects than that. But you're probably not going to start off with your primary guy's cell phone. He's probably not going to give that to you without a warrant, and even then, you might not even get into it if he doesn't cooperate. So we'll say you got 150 people that you've talked to. You've got 175. Potentials. How do you take that big group of people, that broad net that you've cast? How do you bring it down to 1 or 2 people?
Well, it comes down to really good police work. You have to have investigators that are trained in the art of interview and interrogation. Sometimes you have to have the ability just to talk to people. I teach interview and interrogation. I've been teaching it for several years now. If you can get your detectives to schools to learn how to talk to people, to analyze behaviors, to analyze deception, to detect deception when people are being deceptive based on their nonverbal cues. There's a rule. It's called the 7-38-55 rule. That's how people communicate. 7% is their words, and people just talk and talk and talk, and they try and confuse you. Then you got 38%, which is their tone and their delivery. Is their voice going up a few octaves? Is it going down a few octaves? Then you got the nonverbal communication, which is the 55%. So the 38 and the 55 is how people are communicating. So as an investigator, we're looking at the nonverbal behaviors. We're looking at their tone, their delivery, paying attention to things you might see. You might ask a question that's going to trigger fight or flight in somebody. And then you got to ask yourself, hey, why would an innocent person get like super nervous when you're talking to them? Why would their respirations increase? Why would they start sweating? Why would their blink rate increase? So these little clues that when an investigator is cued into this person's personality, the little tiny things, minute details you pick up on, you're all, hey, I'm seeing some stress in this person. Why am I seeing this stress? You detect stress, and then you start asking more questions to indicate maybe this person's being deceptive. And they find out, hey, I'm seeing this behavior. Why am I seeing it? And ask further questions. It's just another tool that detectives can use to identify traits of somebody who might be deceptive. And that could lead to them opening up and talking to you and then confessing to a crime.
So in addition to the advances that we've made everywhere from DNA to interrogations, What about the changes? I won't say advances necessarily, but what about the changes in just the way media covers things? Back in 1947, the press absolutely sensationalized this, and they were
Mhm.
probably second guessing every single move that was being made the entire time. But now we've got social media, we've got everybody has a camera and a podcast, and so the media itself has changed. How does that affect investigations like this today as compared to back then?
As a detective, when I had my cases, I always wanted to involve the public.
Mhm.
The public sometimes are our best eyes and ears out there. The media will put their spin on it. Sometimes they have a narrow mind of how they put things out there. But sometimes when you can get the public involved, get them to assist you, there's some great private public detectives that are out there that know a lot of things. They have a lot of resources, have a lot of tools. I had a bank robbery recently in the last few years. Um, I wanted to put it out there to the media, but I ended up ultimately put it out on our social media pages. Within an hour and a half of putting the photograph of my suspect on social media, within an hour and a half, I had somebody calling up saying, "Your suspect is this person. This is where he lives. This is his house." And we had the suspect identified within 90 minutes of us posting that on social media. So by using the public to help us out, because the public wants to be involved, they want to remove the bad guys from our streets. They want to make society better. And then not just using the media, but when we use the public and use our social media platforms, it's going to help us expand our horizons. So instead of having 3 networks news sources, we have 3,000 to 5,000 to 10,000 network news sources. And then using neighborhood apps like the Nextdoor app or doing our social media on our Ring doorbell apps and neighbors apps, and using those tools out there, it's going to get the word out there. Facebook groups that will help us get our message out there and help us find clues to these crimes that are out there. Something they didn't have in 1947, but if they did, I'm sure they would have had a lot more information to help them identify leads and resources to find the suspect.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's speculate a little bit. I know law enforcement doesn't like to speculate, but I wouldn't have a show if I didn't. So let's speculate a little bit. This drops on your desk. It's 2025. How long do you think it is before you've got a suspect narrowed down with all of the modern technology you have today?
With the resources that we have, I'm going to speculate painting a profile of the victim using her phone, tracking her location history, what her last 48 hours were. I'd be able to find friends that talked to her. I'd see her text messages. I know exactly where she was at within those 48 hours. And that's going to lead me to identifying a possible suspect within those 48 hours. They say the first 48 is the good time frame for us to narrow down a suspect. And I'd say that's about right. Within the first 48 hours, if you don't have a suspect identified, things will start to dry up. They say within the first 24 hours, people start to forget things. But within the first 48 hours, you should be able to have a pretty good idea of where you're going to go with your investigation. So, and you can, with all the tools we have right now, the resources with social media, through cameras, through technology, you should have a good clue of where you're going with this, because people are going to talk and you're going to find some information that will take you down the right path.
I took both the research that was done by Kara and the entire transcript from the interview that I did with Carl and inputted into our AI assistant, Mia. I asked her a simple question. What would happen if the Black Dahlia case happened in 2025? This is her response.
January 15th, 1947. Los Angeles. A body is discovered in a vacant lot, pale, bisected, and posed. The victim is identified as Elizabeth Short, 22. The press calls her the Black Dahlia. Today, the response would be different. The scene is secured. Contamination is controlled. Every trace is documented: biological, digital, and physical. Evidence is preserved in place. DNA from a single hair can produce a familial match. A lead is generated within hours. Blood inside the sack confirms it was used to transport the body. Trace material points to the origin. Her phone provides location history, conversations, and digital behavior before the murder. Movements are reconstructed with precision, each location verified against cell tower records. A license plate reader flags a suspect vehicle. DMV records confirm ownership and location. Facial recognition confirms identity. A known offender appears in multiple data sets. Modern interviews track voice, eye movement, and physiological response. Deception becomes data. In 1947, the case stalled. But in 2025, evidence converges. A warrant is issued. The suspect is located. He is taken into custody without incident. DNA, metadata, and timelines confirm the case.
So here we are, back to the question we opened with. What's next for our industry? After revisiting the Black Dahlia case through the lens of modern technology, it's clear that the tools, the tempo, and the very nature of investigative work have changed forever. We're not looking at subtle improvements. We're living through a seismic shift. AI, machine learning, automated data analysis, advanced forensics, these aren't just enhancements. They're redefining what it means to investigate. At Atlantis Private Investigations, we've embraced that change. We're not clinging to the past. We're building what comes next. We've trained our own AI, developed new research methods, and integrated advanced tools into everything we do. Why? Because we believe that to stay relevant, we must stay ahead. And this isn't about making investigators obsolete. It's about evolving the craft, freeing up human insight and intuition to focus where it matters most. The machines help us dig deeper, move faster, and see more clearly. But it's still up to us to make sense of it all. We're entering a new frontier in investigative work, and I'm proud to be helping chart the course. I'm Michael Braa. Thank you for joining me. This is The Michael Braa Show, and we're just getting started.